Unbelievable. Or maybe believable. Thursday night game. A lot of wild things often happen on Thursday nights. And the West Virginia Mountaineers drop a game to Dana Holgerson and Houston on the road in Houston. And Dana and the Cougars, I put in the headline of the game recap in WV Sports Now, and it's true. They snatch a victory away from the Mountaineers and get their first dub in Big 12 conference play. In fact, not only for this season, but their program history. That's a big one for Dana. May have saved his job. Obviously, a big one for the Houston Cougars. I'm Mike Asti here with our WVU football postgame show here on WV Sports Now. My game recap is there, not in Houston, obviously, though. And unlike our last occurrence there, that was a big win over TCU in Texas when Alan Saunders was there for me on location. We're going to be waiting for some emails from some of these post-game press conferences. A lot for Neil Brown to answer to, though. A lot of questions coming his way. I wish I was there, and we're going to talk with him on Monday if these questions don't get answered here after this game, but that might be a while. So we'll get those videos up here on the channel and on the site when we get them. Until that time, feel free to chat along with me here. Feel free to join me. We'll basically, depending on you, we'll see how long this goes. And the rest of our coverage, again, is WV Sports Now. And, I mean, West Virginia, this is one that, again, I'm torn in how to almost analyze this. Because this was a game that obviously West Virginia was favored going in, despite it being a road game. They were having a much better season. They were 4-1 entering Dana Holgerson and Houston 2-3. You would think this would be an easy win for West Virginia. Now, I have been saying for months, even prior to the season and seeing the hot start for the Mountaineers, that I thought this was definitely a trap game. If they had a good start, it could be a trap game to trip you up, which is what happened. And if you didn't, then it could be another problem game. And I thought it would be a bad matchup for West Virginia. It was. And the game eventually unfolded exactly how Dana Holgerson and Houston wanted it to unfold. It wasn't exactly a game that they weren't also probably needing to wipe sweat off their brow, and their fans, if you see any of them, because they're not on social media and not many of them at the game, but the Houston fans that do exist, and there was a contingent there that were rowdy at the stadium, they probably were on pins and needles too. Both fan bases were going to be like that, and if that occurred, that probably would eventually favor Houston and Dana. Because Dana has had these games before. He probably figured, okay, we're a team that's blown games because our defense isn't that great. Maybe we got some pieces on the D-line, okay, but we want to make this a shootout. We want to have West Virginia's offense have to hang with us because they've been winning games ugly, but they haven't had to really put points on the board with any consistency throughout this season. Neil Brown said it this week. They would have to be more explosive on offense. They would have to be better through the passing game. And, of course, Garrett Green had the numbers through the passing game in this game. They did eventually get explosive plays in this game, whether it be to Cole Taylor, Devin Carter, of course, to Traylon Ray for the score, and even Hudson Clement, which looked to be the game winner, a West Virginia native. That would have been sweet for him off the comments, of course, Dana made about West Virginia-born players and West Virginia high school football not up to snuff with other areas. That would have been a cool moment for Hudson Clement. Maybe he's aware of those comments. I'd imagine he is. Maybe he was thinking about those comments. Either way, it could have been a game winner for him. The man wasn't even on scholarship before the season, earned that scholarship with a big game earlier this year against Duquesne. But doing it to Houston, a conference team, that would mean more than an FCS opponent. And that was a moment that it looked like West Virginia's offense was going to stall. It looked like they weren't going to get it done. It looked like they weren't going to go anywhere, even though they had the ball late in the game after it went back and forth. And then all of a sudden, it looked like they weren't even going to be in field goal range. And then all of a sudden, Hudson Clement, gets into the end zone there off the completion and then just runs by everybody to get in. And then, of course, the Hail Mary to win it for Houston. But this was a game that unraveled the way Houston wanted to unravel. Now, of course, Dana and Houston, they had the vibes. They thought they lost this game. They didn't think they'd be dumping Gatorade right now. They thought this game was over and it was going to be a rough loss for Dana Holgerson. It really might have embodied his tenure at Houston, certainly the last couple years after that one big season they had. It would have been a really funky way to start their first season in Big 12 play. And it might have been a loss they couldn't get over. even though their season's kind of going nowhere even with the win. At least maybe now you could crawl into a bowl game, but you lose that way. You move to 2-4. You're over in conference play. You lose to his former team. You're at home, and they were playing better in that whole second half. It didn't look like Brown and his team could stop Brown and company over there on the other sideline at all, as he was able to slice and dice, and West Virginia was missing tackles. A lot of that West Virginia defensive effort of the second half is what was the problem a year ago. They've been way better this year. If it's not for the defense, this team was 1-4 entering the game and, would be way out of it. But they were 4-1 entering because the defense stepped up when the offense was basically impotent. And this game, the offense put points on the board, and then the defense kind of faltered too, even though you got to hand it to Houston in their offense. And then Houston ends up with the victory, 41-39. I thought Houston could win this game. I picked Houston to win this game everywhere I spoke about this game. I didn't have the score, of course. I don't know if I exactly thought it would be this way, even though if it unfolded like this, it would favor Dana Holgorsen and the Cougars. But for anybody out there saying that Houston got lucky, they did, 100%. And if West Virginia would have won off the Hudson Clement game winner, if that would have been a game winner, if that touchdown catch would have been what won it for West Virginia, they would have been lucky too. This game was a game that was going to be won by the team that had the ball last, and Houston had the ball last in the final seconds, and then they won. Doesn't make you feel good at all about West Virginia, as they certainly got exposed to a bad team. Even though they were a little bit more explosive on offense, they were worse defensively. They were banged up entering the game despite the bye. All those players that maybe could play, there were game time decisions, they didn't go. It eventually was a problem that got picked apart in that second half in particular, with the Houston offense picking apart the West Virginia secondary, that whether it be Ruffin, Floyd, whoever, it was basically a pass interference every time they're even close to covering anybody. Otherwise, wide open plays. And then, of course, the interception there at the end should have been a touchdown for Jalen Anderson. If that's a score, the game's different. That's hustle and effort for Houston. It was like a bowl game atmosphere the way they were playing in this game. It felt like a little bit more energy and a little bit more effort on their side, even though West Virginia kept hanging in and had the heart to it would look to be the game winner to come in again, but certainly to hang always in there. So it's not like West Virginia had a never say die, didn't have a never say die attitude. They did, but Houston just played with a little bit more. They were a little luckier. Calls went their way a little bit more. The ball bounced their way a little bit more. They were better certainly at the end of the game, and they were better in the second half. They were the better team when this game counted, certainly. Even if West Virginia had more possession in that first half, they didn't have anything of a lead that should say you have that possession. And then, of course, the early game kickoff return, that's a backbreaker because you lose a game by 2 points. So you can point to a kickoff return that shouldn't have happened. That was a problem last season that got cleaned up this year on special teams. Even allowed a kickoff return to an FCS team last year. Shouldn't happen, never should happen. It's going to happen occasionally, but that certainly swung this game for Houston at the end of the day. Obviously, the Jalen Anderson interception that should have been a touchdown ends up being an interception that led to points. That was a 7-point swing in favor of Houston. And then, of course, allowing the Hail Mary to be converted, allowing that to be successful. You very rarely ever see that. The ball's tipping everywhere. I was basically setting up shop, about to go to the bathroom before I do the post-game show here. And no, you hear some celebration from the fans that are there, and they end up with the catch, and Houston ends up winning. So West Virginia now sits at 4-2. Overall, a 4-2 record after 6 games is better than most predicted. I mean, the over-under was 4.5 wins on the season, and most certainly nationally thought this team would struggle to win 3 or 4 games all year. They do have 4. I will say, as much as this game sucks, they shouldn't lose. They shouldn't lose the way they did. They made too many mistakes to win this game. They almost snatched what should have been a loss away from it being a loss, but they end up with a loss anyway. So it's almost fitting because Dana almost deserves this win more than West Virginia did the way this game unfolded. It's like West Virginia tried to lose this game, and then they almost won it in crazy fashion at the end, and then Houston ends up with the win. So it's hard to feel bad for West Virginia losing this game. It is. They played a way to lose it. It folded right for Dana and Houston to get the win. But and I'm sure Dana, or I'm sure Neil will say this on Monday, that 4-2 is a better record than anybody thought, and 2 more wins do get you into a bowl. And it is hard to believe with the schedule coming up, because it was harder earlier than it will be at the end, no matter whether you're looking at preseason grades or how things have gone now. There aren't that. I mean, Oklahoma's going to be a loss, obviously, you would imagine, but UCF's, it's on the road. It'll be tough, but I mean, they're not a world beater. Oklahoma State has really, slodged through this season. That's certainly a team that you can beat. Baylor, they beat them last year, and they're the same. They're struggling against Group of 5 teams. So again, this team should get 2 more wins. 2 more wins would get you into a bowl, and 2 more wins probably bring Neil Brown back, whether you want him or not. Maybe not if this is just like you're going 2-5 down the stretch and then you get to 6. Maybe then not, but overall, probably. We'll see how all that goes, though. And they do have a home game coming up, and it is a favorable opponent they should beat again, but they should have won this game. And Vegas odds have been well off on the Mountaineers. They've been winning games Vegas says they were going to lose, and then they're favored here finally. The second time they've been favored entering a game with the FCS game, and then they do lose this. This is worse than the Miami debacle. And of course, obviously, Ron, you're referring to years and years ago. Yeah, I mean, I was younger back in the day. I know what you're referring to. I wasn't catching it and wasn't watching at the time, so I wasn't feeling that emotion at the time that you probably were back then. But again, this is a horrible way to lose a game. Doesn't matter what happened prior in the game. This is a god-awful way to lose a game. If you want a bright spot, the offense was more explosive, and they finally scored some points, and Garrett Green's putting 400 yards on the board and all of that. He wasn't perfect in this game by any means, though. Missed some throws. The receivers dropped some balls. Obviously, the Jalen Anderson pass that should have went from a touchdown, it should have been a touchdown. It ends up being 7 points the other way on an interception, and then Houston scores. That swings it. The return unacceptable on special teams on that coverage. It looked like, honestly, they could have ran back every return, for crying out loud. So again, no matter how this game unfolded, losing that way sucks. It's going to sting. It's going to be a rough trip back, and winnable or not in their next game, homecoming or not, celebrating Chuck Halley or not. And these are games coming up, and these are winnable games. Again, BYU's there as well. Cincinnati's there. These teams are not good this year. They should get 2 more wins, guys. I mean, 4-2. You don't want to lose this way. You don't want to lose to Dana. Obviously, these players don't have any animosity to Dana besides Ruffin. They didn't play for him. But you just don't want to lose this way on the road when you think you got to win. And if they would have won this game off the Hudson Clement game winner, we would be having a show right now. And I would be saying to you, they didn't play well. They made tons of mistakes. They probably deserve to lose this game. Kind of sucks for Dana to go down that way, but West Virginia managed to win. And kind of what I did put on Twitter by the way, I just deleted because I didn't want all the notifications. I thought they won. They didn't win. It's not that serious. But I would have been telling you how they won a game they wouldn't have won a year ago and how the vibes are better, and somehow they're 5-1, but they haven't been impressive in any games. But Neil Brown's not going to apologize for winning and all that. And they would have snatched a loss they would have snatched away a loss and made it a win, I guess would be what to say there. But it was not to be. Was not to be. It almost felt like maybe it was to be for Dana this whole night. Again, I had vibes. I didn't feel good about this game I haven't felt good about this game for a while. And I didn't feel good about this game all day long. And the way this game was unfolding, even with the possession being so heavily favoring West Virginia in that first half, they weren't having the points to suggest that. The return's a backbreaker. And then after that Jalen Anderson play, where he should have caught a touchdown, it ends up being an interception and then 7 points for Houston. That felt like right there, that was going to lead the Cougars to a win. That felt like that was going to lead the Cougars to a win. And Gerald, I'm going to respond to that because I see the comment there about a bowl game is not good enough. I want to make this very clear. The expectations of the West Virginia program overall, in general, 15th winningest program, I get it. We can debate all day if you want to claim 1922. They've done everything under the sun except for winning a legit national title. It's a successful program, okay? There's been bad decades, but certainly the last 40 years, more success than not. The last 4+ years, now we're into year 5 here. This is still a winning record, but these 5 years of Neil Brown have been the darkest days since the 70s. I get it. 1 bowl win in 5 years and only a few bowl appearances if they would crawl into one this year. Not good enough overall. The expectations for a West Virginia program, certainly even in the new Big 12. I mean, you look at the new Big 12, they're going to be the winningest program. There is NIL money there, even though the school's struggling financially. The NIL money for the football and basketball program's there. It 100% is. What's going on at the school does not mean it's happening on the football field or on the basketball court or across athletics. I'm not saying they're rolling in cash and they're really, really rich, but it's not like the school. You gotta disconnect. They're different buckets of money, they're different situations. So it's not that dire. They have NAL money there. I mean, one of the boosters has a Major League Baseball team right now in the NLCS, by the way. So he's making more money, and it's going to go to WVU at some point. He's a big supporter, a big booster. He wants the Mountaineers to do well. So it's not the end of the world in that regard financially. And overall expectations, certainly when you get Oklahoma and Texas out of there as blue bloods, should absolutely be at least a bowl game, if not more, every season. 100%. And I'm not saying 6 wins even needs to be the bar. You go into every year, you should expect more. The expectations for a West Virginia Mountaineer program should be more than crawling into 6-6, crawling into an average record, crawling into a bowl game. You should expect more. I'm not saying you got to expect a natty every year or expect a conference title every year, but yes, a bowl game, generally speaking, is not good enough. But you got to do this year to year as well. They were just 5-7. They were just awful. They were way worse than they've been this season, even though this is a horrible loss. 4-2 overall, and winning some gritty games and getting some big wins and getting some tough wins, etc. Beating your rival, you go on the road and beat TCU, the national runner-up, even though they're different this year. You beat Texas Tech, who you haven't been able to beat before. Those are games they wouldn't have won last year. If this team was sitting with this schedule in these situations of players getting carted off, you're seeing the Hail Mary, you got the former coach, you got a backyard brawl, all of that. If last year's team had this, I mean, they'd be probably like 1-5, 2-4. It'd be flipped. Okay. So this is a much better team. There's more heart. They're showing you more desire. They're playing better. They've been more fundamentally sound on defense prior to the second half of this game. They've been less explosive on offense, but they've been better on defense, been a better overall team. And Brown, actually, I think with some play calls in this game, was coached better. I'm not saying perfect, but he's coached better than last year. So, and you got to give it to the coordinators too. So this team has been better. Everyone's done better. And they were just 5-7. Now, if you puttered away and only win 2 out of your last, 7 games or something like that, it's not going to feel good. And maybe that wouldn't be enough. And maybe he then would get fired. However, 6-6 and a bowl game when everyone and their brother thought this team would barely win 3 or 4 games and they were just 5-7 missing a bowl game. It's not horrendous, guys. I'm not saying it's expectations that you should have every season or it's a standard bear at West Virginia. I'm not saying that at all. However, you compare it to last year, you look at the situation this year, and also playing 11 Power 5s when pretty much everyone else plays 10. And yeah, there's some bad teams out of these Power 5s, but still 11 out when everyone else plays 10. It's not horrendous. It does suck when you lose a game this way and then you putter it away down the stretch. But I want to make this clear. We're talking the team is 4-2. It's a horrible loss. You don't feel good about it. I get the fans are going to feel worse about it because it's Dana, even though these players don't feel that about Dana. They just are upset about losing. But it's not like you're 2-4. And if you go ahead and beat Oklahoma State, now you're 5-2 and you're a game away from a bowl game. Then your next win is bowl eligibility. So it's really hard for me to believe they're not going to win 2 more games. It really, really is, even though this game sucks and they didn't play well in the second half and they should have lost and they made mistakes and they almost won, but then they kind of deserved the loss. So all that's true. But 2 more wins, it's hard to believe they're not going to pick up. And then they're going to be a bowl team, and who knows what happens in that game. But I'm not saying 6-6 is the standard that you should expect every year at West Virginia. That is not the standard of Mountaineer football. I get it. You've achieved a lot more than that throughout the program's overall history and certainly recent memory, certainly prior to Brown. But you go off last year and then you go with what people expected this season, it's a little different. I mean, going into off of projections, people had this team with 1 win entering this game. People had 1 or 2 wins entering this game. People had this team 1-5, 2-4 right now, and instead they're 4-2. That's the first conference loss, the 2-1 in conference. So it's not good. It's bad vibes. Losing that way sucks. It really, really does. I get it stinging to you, but To sit there and act like this season's all lost or they're not even going to make a bowl game is a bit much. Now, obviously, they're not going to be ranked. I do think a couple weeks ago they had an argument, but not now. That was just off of what other teams around the country were not doing because they were not having any quality wins. But that's over, obviously, and they got to try to get a freaking bowl game out of this. They got to win games. They got to beat Oklahoma State when you're at home. You got to win your freaking home games. And that's not a good team you're facing. It's not Mike Gundy's old Oklahoma State team. This is the current one, and they're not good. They miss more tackles than anybody else. They're more penalized than anybody else. West Virginia more penalized in this game than they've really been all season. But Oklahoma State even worse, and they're doing it every week. So it's a game the Mountaineers should definitely win. And they could lose, but again, 2 more wins seems very reasonable now. And it's a stinging bad loss to lose on the road to your former coach. I get it, but this is not last year. This is not 2022. No, Anthony, that's not, there's no way that's the case. Here's the reason why this does not compare to 13-9. You maybe are the fan who maybe feels that way. Granted, again, that game meant a lot more and could have been a lot more for the program than this is a middle of the road regular season game. Okay. Dana's team is still 3-3 with a 1-2 conference record. It's not like they're fighting you. No, it's not even close to that. And the players don't feel it being the same. This is a bad loss. It stings to them. But what I got to get across, and these fans certainly don't, it seems like it's hard to grasp. And I get it because it's an emotional way to lose, and it's the former coach, and it sucks losing this way. I get it. Besides Ruffin, nobody was coached under Dana. Only a couple of the guys were recruited by Dana. They're not sitting there worrying about Dana. You're upset because it's the former coach that was a jerk and basically threw you through the mud when he left. And yeah, maybe you wanted to break up the marriage too, but he also wanted to leave. He took a group of 5 job when he left. All of that. I get it. I get what he said about West Virginia born players, although it's not been disproven to this point. He said they couldn't win a Big 12. I mean, they haven't, but it's not 07. It's not lost. This one might have been the most depressing and devastating thing I've experienced in years. Great train, man. Congrats on your life. Apparently, a team losing a Thursday night football game in college football on a last-second Hail Mary is the worst thing you got going. That means life's pretty good for you. So all the best. I'm really happy for the fantastic ride that you're living on because you're on a cloud. Because I got to tell you, most people out there got bigger problems than losing on a Hail Mary. And this does really, really suck. And I get fans are attached and you feel like you're part of the team because the players and coaches may feel like this is the worst thing for them. But I am sure, and I know for a fact for several of them, worse things have happened. Okay, Devin Carter's grandma passed away. We got Kobe Spells, who's a big player last year. You wonder why you haven't heard his name that much? He's dealing with a lot of personal life things off the field. Way worse than losing this game this way. So, again, saying this is the worst thing to happen for you in the last several years means your life's going pretty well. Life's going pretty well. So, and again, I'm not saying this is the standard for the history of the program. I don't know how many times I can say that. I'm not saying 6-6 should be what you expect every season at West Virginia, but nope. Unless you're Dion bringing 80+ players, 5-7 to say they go 7-5 because they only need 3 more wins to get there and then get a bowl. That is a pretty solid turnaround in any other situation. You just don't want to admit it would be a solid turnaround because this is a horrible loss and you don't like Neil Brown. But I'm telling you right now, he goes 7-5 and gets to a bowl, even though it would be a little bit sluggish because they had such a hot start. I don't think Rent's firing him. So you guys got to root for this team to basically lose every freaking game if you really want Brown gone. If they go beat Oklahoma State and then they have 5 wins and they're sitting there at 5-2 and 3-1 in conference play, and that's a home game against a bad team, again, you're riding the wave probably to next year. They don't want to fire Brown. I always thought a bowl game would get him back. It's a little different because you have 4 wins so quickly that if you only get to 6, that means you're really losing at the end. But, they're going to look for a reason probably. And again, 7 might make you feel more comfortable in keeping him. I don't think 9 is happening probably, but 8 wins might actually be obtainable still because you have 4 so early. And the schedule's not that brutal coming up. But we'll see. I mean, they got to beat Oklahoma State. That's basically a must-win game now. Basically a must-win game at home. 100, and I'll be there. I'll be in the press box there, so there won't be a post-game show. But 100, that is a must win game. I mean, this should have been a win. Absolutely. They played so poorly despite the Clement touchdown at the end. It's hard to say they didn't deserve to lose this game. And then Houston eventually did win it, although Houston kind of almost blew it as well. They both would have deserved to lose. They both would have deserved to win, and Houston ends up with the win. But West Virginia got to beat Oklahoma State now at home, 100%. 100%. You cannot be 4-3 and tie up conference play after back-to-back team losses against bad teams after your hot start. Cannot happen. Well, Kelsey, I can't compare announcers to this in Penn State. I was at Happy Valley, so I was in State College. I watched some replays back, but I didn't watch a full game. Obviously, I was there in attendance in the press box, so I did not obviously watch that whole game. Dealing with those announcers, different broadcast too. That's NBC. This is FS1, and I don't want to hate a guy calling games because I did it back in the day. I still do it. Maybe try to do it occasionally here. I did it many years. Love calling games. It's a hard craft. Do a lot. I did a lot more color than play-by-play, but did some play-by-play too. And Tim Brando, love the guy. He's not listening, so I'm just going to say this: he had a rough go. Man's name's Sean Martin, is not Sam Martin. Called him Sam Martin like 7 times in a row. Spencer didn't even try to correct him, so that's a whiff on the color guy too, because you have more time to look at things. You can bump him and say, hey, that you need to correct it, even if it's on a commercial. And you got a lot of them on a national broadcast, for crying out loud. They went commercial, Sam Martin. Before the commercial, come out of the commercial, is saying the name wrong still. It looks like Spencer Tillman just didn't do any research, and Tim Brando's sitting there just calling people wrong names. They were saying they didn't see a touchdown signal on one of the touchdowns. Let me tell you, I saw it on my couch. So I don't know how they didn't see it. I'm on my couch. I saw it. They didn't see it, and they kept saying they didn't see it. It was there. Saw the hands. It was a touchdown. So, again, I think it was a rough go for them calling the game. I honestly do. I didn't want to tweet this, and hopefully they actually don't hear it because I don't like to trash other media members. But my Lord, it was a rough go. It really was. But he's had some great calls. This, not one of them. I don't know what they mess up on the Dale Wolfley thing. I saw they said that Dale Wolfley passed away. How sad it is. Great Mountaineer. I don't know what they messed up there. And I don't know if you can say the refs were having a bad night, honestly. I mean, I want everyone to understand. Entering this game, West Virginia was one of the least penalized teams in the country. So 4-2, it's hard to say the referees have been screwing this team all year. I mean, they were one of the least penalized teams in the country entering this game. Was it 7-8 penalties in this game? Both teams had penalties up and down. I understand you are going to probably point to some of those pass interferences and say that every time Houston would throw a ball up beyond 20, 30 yards, it'd be a PI. Well, look at the last one. Look at the Ruffin and Floyd one. Certainly the Floyd one at the end basically tackled the freaking guy. Didn't have to. The ball wasn't catchable. That's just as much of a blunder as the kickoff return, special teams, or Jalen Anderson bobbling what should have been a touchdown and then allowing it to be a pick and score the other way. And on the Houston drive, the next play or two. Like, it's all bad. But when you tackle the receiver, you're going to get a PI call, whether it's intended or not, whether you can catch it or not. You cannot tackle the guy that you're covering. And Houston had the same situation with a holding that allowed West Virginia to get a big play earlier in the game too. So I don't know. Again, Kelsey, if you're telling me the refs have been bad all season long, I just don't see how that's factually the case. I put a post up on WB Sports Now. I'm sure they miss calls. I'm not saying that all the calls have been perfect. I do think some of them a little chintzy. I'm not going to say they shouldn't have called what they called at the end there on the Green celebration, because I think Green, while he played well, he played with a lack of maturity that looked like he was an inexperienced player. Some of the overthrows, some of the clock management, the celebration at the end. Okay, just tonight? Yeah, because they were one of the least penalized teams coming into this game. It's hard to complain prior to this game. I think some of the calls were chintzy. I don't think the refs had their best day. But what I will say, Kelsey, the reason why West Virginia cannot blame this game on the referees, there were calls for both teams like that. West Virginia had countless moments that I've already articulated that led to this loss, allowing the kickoff return, the Jalen Anderson touchdown that wasn't, that ended up being a pick, and then Houston goes and scores, and then allowing a Hail Mary at the end. Right there. Those 3. We can talk about all the other ones if you want. I watched the game with you. But those 3, you change one of them, and West Virginia wins. If that's a Jalen Anderson touchdown, if the kickoff return doesn't happen, if the Hail Mary obviously isn't successful, any of those, that's a win. Hey, Derek, what's going on? I finally got actually somebody that I know personally here. So Derek Rudolph, I believe. Yes, Derek Rudolph, fellow United 2 alum of mine. Been a while, Derek. Hope you're doing well. And yes, this was painful. I'd imagine this was painful to watch this game and take this in. And for fans losing to Dana, even though the players don't really care and Neil and him are fine. But for the fans to lose to Dana, for this to be on the road when it could have been another, even though Houston's not good, another conference road win could have been a big feather in your cap. Being undefeated in conference, and I got to make this clear, Oklahoma's idle this week. They're on a bye. You would have been sitting there for 7 days, both 3-0. I'm assuming it would flip and Oklahoma would be the favorite here, but there would have been a week where they were tied. That would have been a lot of graphics would have been put up. It would have been interesting, kind of a cool sight to see. And that was a minute of just elation. Yeah, I mean, I was shocked too. I, tweeted holy shit and gave another holy shit there when the Hail Mary happened. I mean, the Hudson Clement TD I did not at all think was happening. I thought West Virginia was going to lose by getting tackled there and not having, they don't convert fourth down or Green gets tackled or they just don't go anywhere even if they get the first. It did not look like they were even going to get in field goal range. And then all of a sudden, Clement into the end zone, and it looked to be the game winner. It was not. So not only do you lose to Dana, not only do you lose what could have been a road win, not only do you lose your first conference game, not only do you probably save Dana's job there, and that's the place he left you for, not only do you lose a game that you have several tenets of that game that you can exactly point to on why you lost, and you lose to a bad team. And the vibes now, clearly, based on this chat, based on what's going on, I mean, people are talking about they're not even going to make a bowl, guys. I mean, the vibes are flipped right back to a 180, despite a 4-2 record. Not many 4-2 teams out there have fans saying they're not going to make a bowl game. We're talking about 2 more wins, and there's a bunch left. But the vibes are flipped because nobody predicted this team to be good entering the season. And they were 4-1 off of gritty wins against probably bad teams now. And they get exposed here, although they still hung in there and fought, and it looked like they were going to win, and they were showing heart, and they had that never say die attitude for sure. Green's stats are good, even though he missed some targets, and I think he had, an up and down game. But they lose. Yeah, that's interesting too. I'm not sure how Houston's so bad. They have some dudes. They have dudes at receiver. They have a dude at QB. The defense. I mean, Holgerson had 2 10-win seasons at WVU. He did win the Orange Bowl. He had another 10-win season in 2016 that nobody seemingly remembers. He was in a bowl game 7 out of 8 years. Most of the time was averaging 7-8 wins. Had that one bad 4-win season. It wasn't a great era. It was a good era. It was not a bad one. It could have been great if they would have had a defense. Lost a lot of games they should have won like this without having a defense. So that's kind of the life he's living at Houston too. I mean, the defense is okay on the D-line, but usually their secondary is rough. Usually teams can put up points against them. West Virginia did eventually put points up against them and probably should have put more up. So there's a reason why Houston's not great, and they might crawl to a bowl game. But I mean, Dana sipping on a Red Bull off a 6-6 record is like the ceiling for them, even now, sitting there at 3-3. So this isn't going to make a special year for Houston or Dana, and they probably should be better than their record, but they're not that good. Yeah, and I agree with that too, Kelsey. Last year's team would have never came back in this game. They would have lost by 2 or 3 scores. Last year's team would have never beat Pitt in the backyard brawl despite Fodrikovic throwing interceptions. Last year's team would have never beat Texas Tech when they were coming back in the game. Last year's team would have never beat TCU on the road, the defending national runner-up, after all those players got carted off. Burks, Remack, Wyatt Milam, all those players leaving that game with an injury. Obviously, Trey Lathan breaking, out for the year. If all of that happened in that game, they would have lost. So this team would be 2-4 or 1-5 if it was last year's effort. If it was last year's team, if it was last year, off of everything that's gone down. But they are 4-2. They are 2 wins away from a bowl. They're still 2-1 in conference play. This is a horrible way to lose. Horrible way to lose. I cannot imagine flying back home. That is going to be rough flight. It really will. And as bad as I thought this matchup would be, they should have stole the game at the end. You lose in a Hail Mary. It sucks all the way around. And you have the interception off what should have been a touchdown, and then you have the kickoff return. I mean, you have moments that you can point to and say that's why we lost. That sucks. Hogerson's hair sucks. I don't know. It depends on what you're thinking. It depends on whether you like that old uncle, kind of drunk uncle look with the hair flailing about, or whether you want a combed look. I think the hair fits him and his personality just fine, and I don't think anyone minds the hair. Other things maybe are what people focus in on. So glad we got a hair joke in there to kind of add some levity to this. But I think Dana's hair is fine. I think Dana needs to, again, recruit better and get a defense. I think Neil Brown actually had some moments here. I'd like to actually get some opinions. I know we got a Neil Brown suck comment in there. There were some plays I actually thought that were good that were called in this game, and Neil Brown's calling the plays this year, obviously. Last year, he called at the end, did not call in the season, and prior to that, it's something to be desired. But some of the moments in this game were fine. I don't think he lost this game by himself. I think this team defensively kind of collapsed. Houston had this game unfold for them. Some bad moments and mistakes by the players themselves, and I'm sure he wasn't telling them to do those things, ruined the game, and then you lose on a Hail Mary. I'm going to get close to wrapping this up here if we got anything else. Right, Derek. Yeah, I even tweeted that. He dissed players from West Virginia, meaning he made the comment about, didn't believe West Virginia players could win the Big 12 with West Virginia players and all that. Granted, again, they have not won the Big 12 with West Virginia players. And the best players in Mountaineer history, with the exception of Sam Huff and Chuck Howley, and we're talking about way, way, way back over a half century ago, in the last 50 years, the best players of West Virginia have not been from West Virginia. They do have good West Virginia players. Hudson Clement is one. Zach Frazier is another. They got others on the lines. West Virginia has certainly churned some players, but generally speaking, in West Virginia recruiting, they look at Georgia, they look at Ohio, they're even looking at New Jersey. Certainly in Florida, they've been living for a long time. West Virginia's recruiting areas, they're looking at West Virginia, but they're going other places. High school football is just better in Georgia, Alabama, Florida, Texas, Pennsylvania, Ohio, California. They're not really recruiting there, but California. That's just the case. Michigan, that's just the case. So they can't live in West Virginia and think that's going to build you a championship team. It's just not. They have to go everywhere else. However, it would have been an incredible moment for a West Virginia native, and I tweeted at the time. That's what's been deleted. So, yes, he's from Martinsburg. That would have been sweet for Hudson Clement, a guy that was not even on scholarship entering the season, that got on scholarship after a big game this year from West Virginia. If he got the game winner to beat Dana Holgorsen after the comments Dana Holgorsen made, yeah, that would have been sweet. We'd ask him how sweet it is on Monday. But instead of a game-winning touchdown reception that really should have been, and it would have been a really cool moment for that kid that's worked his you-know-what off to get to this point and earn that scholarship, and then not only get the scholarship, but still be a quality receiver, probably the second best on the team. And Devin Carter has been up and down, even though he's the one. So you could argue Hudson Clement has been the most consistent this season, certainly from week 2 on. Maybe Traylon Ray's in there too, but that's a true freshman. Same with Gallagher, who's not really done much yet this year as an impact player. So would have been a really, really cool moment, but didn't happen. The catch happened, but the moment didn't happen as the game winner because of the Hail Mary. Silent antics were entertaining. Didn't give you as many in this game. I mean, obviously, he was really upset about what could have been a fumble on CJ, and then you had the call being dead, the play being dead. So that could have been where Dana really exploded. It was like a tempered volcano comparison to what he used to do with West Virginia. We've seen Dana explode a lot more than he exploded in this game, even when he thought he was going to lose. And even after the Clement touchdown, it was more of more of one of those, just sulking and knowing that, okay, I'm unlucky this year, and maybe my Houston tenure is unlucky, more than him exploding in anger. So, but yeah, we didn't get him crawling on the ground like the bowl game. Yeah, I mean, Dana's provided some real fantastic moments. There's even a picture we have at WV Sports Now that I haven't really had a legitimate reason to ever post because that just would look like, not professional. But there's one in there in the gallery that somebody took for us back in the day, that before I was actually with the outlet. of Dana like flailing about and like it's like a weird like I think it was a good moment where it's like a weird fist bump, but he's somehow mad at a referee and like falling over. So Dana gives you all that, and his hair flails about, and he's probably pounding a Red Bull right now. Neil Brown's given you more energy the last couple of years in terms of being angry, and he certainly looked a little bit like that in this game, but a lot more of it certainly at the end talking to the referees was like, my luck again. He had a lot of luck go his way this year, but not in this game. I am a West Virginia Mountaineer living in Houston. This was a hard and embarrassing loss. Amy, that is rough to be there. Our only benefit is I don't feel like there are that many Houston Cougar fans. So there weren't that many at the stadium. There's not that many on social media. I mean, how many people are bragging to you? The 4 people that were at the stadium and getting rowdy? Because that's all I got, and they're students. So if you're an adult and you don't talk to students, I think you're okay. But yeah, it's a rough loss. Losing that way, losing to Dana, losing on the road, what could have been 3-0 in conference play, 5-1 overall. You know, a lot of teams in front of them are getting votes. Like Maryland did not beat Ohio State. That was still going to be their only quality win of the season. Again, I believe they got another, I think they have like Rutgers coming up, so it's another gimme game. Like they're going to win, but like they don't have a quality win. Louisville is no longer a back half top 25 team because they got the win over Notre Dame, so they're way up there at 14. Fresno has lost, and they're a group of 5 with only one Power 5 opponent. They're bounced out. A lot of the teams, LSU, Northwestern, Florida, they've lost a couple times. That's going to hurt them. A win for West Virginia, even over a bad Houston team on the road, that might have bounced them in the rankings. They certainly would have got some votes. Now they're not going to get any, obviously. Those are gone. But they're still 4-2. They're still 2-1 in conference play. It always was probably feeling like Texas and Oklahoma would be leaving the Big 12 and playing for the Big 12 title in that last season together and then go to the SEC together and one of them win it. It would really suck for the conference, but they can worry about the future after that game. They're the 2 best. It feels like Oklahoma and Texas are in a collision course for another Red River rivalry, the last one in the Big 12 to be in the Big 12 title game. And then they both go to the SEC and the winner gets the trophy to leave the conference. That feels like it's going to happen. That felt like it was going to happen even when WVU was winning, but a win would have kept that apple cart to maybe be upset. But that's probably what's going to happen. But West Virginia still certainly has a chance at a bowl game. They still have a lot in front of them, and that next win's very winnable. But it's a must win now. They got to beat Oklahoma State. Like that is now a must win. You cannot lose at home against another bad team after losing to this bad team on the road. Forget Dana. Houston was bad. Houston still is bad. And you lost. So next game is a must win for the Mountaineers. But a win here and you really could have a chance of making this a special year. 5-1 and 3-0 in conference play, and your only loss is to a top 5 Penn State team that people think can win the Big Ten. If not win the Big Ten, certainly at least go to the playoff either way. That is how good Penn State is. They are beating teams down. That would have been a quality loss, to say the very, very least. Oklahoma State, by the way, has missed among the most tackles in the Big 12 this year. They have been upset. Funny. The game is in Morgantown. Nothing is a gimme. Obviously. Right now, they're 7th in the Big 12. And I know that they got the win over Kansas State, who you could argue maybe was overrated entering the season. But Oklahoma State losing to South Alabama, losing to Iowa State, I got it in front of me here. No. I mean, no. Oklahoma State with one win is not, you're not going to try to convince me Oklahoma State is a good team, even though they beat West Virginia. West Virginia maybe isn't as good as they looked after 5 games. So Oklahoma State is not a good team. They haven't been playing well. West Virginia should get the win. But let me put it this way, rather than debate on how good Oklahoma State is or not. West Virginia got to win. They have to. It is a must-win game. It is a winnable game, but it is a must-win game. I don't care what you can say about how the Oklahoma State had a big win recently and they're going to make up for the bad losses earlier in the season, and now all of a sudden they're good. We don't need to debate it. Yes, actually, I will, because Jalen Daniels isn't playing in the game. Unless that changes, the reports that Pete Thamel's putting out there is that Jalen Daniels is doubtful and not playing. So you're beating a Kansas team that has now been vulnerable, that has now shown they can be exposed and would have their starting quarterback, who was great last year against West Virginia, had a great renaissance year that led them into basically being flirting with a ranking and getting into a bowl game before he got hurt again this year, and now it looks like missing this game. So if Kansas does not have their starting quarterback, Oklahoma beating them is not going to be any type of quality win. It's not like Kansas is looking at a top 10 ranking themselves. So no, whatever your real name is, because I don't think it's wet blanket. No, that would be a wet blanket win. It'd be a backup QB that you're beating against a non-ranked team. Sorry. Kansas State's the big win. That's a big win. Beating Kansas with Jalen Daniels missing the game is not anything to brag about. Sorry. But again, West Virginia, it's not like I'd be blown away if West Virginia would lose to Oklahoma State and all of a sudden be a bad team, because they were supposed to be a bad team entering the year. I didn't think I didn't pick West Virginia to win 8 or 9 games in my preseason preview. Okay. They're 4-2 though, and 2-1 in conference play. They beat some average teams, but they got some wins they wouldn't have had a year ago. They should have won this game in many regards. They did not, though. And the other loss is to a potential playoff team in Penn State, one of the top 5 best teams in the country. So it's a better team than many would have thought, and there's reasons to think they're at least going to win at home against Oklahoma State, but who knows? And again, this is supposed to be a revenge tour season for WVU, or at least the way the year was unfolding for a while. Now, after you lose this game, who knows? And we'll see if Dana makes it back to West Virginia next year. He still needs to win some more games to keep his job there. But big win for Dana, big win for Houston. They really must wins for Dana and Houston, honestly. That might have been it for Dana with this loss, whether fair or unfair. And Bradley, I'm going to get close to closing this show out here. Got to wrap up the coverage. But Bradley Bowden, defensive secondary was a big disappointment. Houston has decent receivers, but we got picked apart, not nearly as much as the quarterback pressure against TCU either. Boom, but also what I put in the keys to the victory preview. That was in my preview. That was one of the secondary was a key. The secondary had to play well. You're losing Burks. That was a major hit. Everyone else had to step up. They didn't really do so. Beanie Bishop had big picks in earlier games this year. He was a major player in earlier games this year, was a big presence in earlier games this year. Not really in this one. I think his name was called 1 or 2 times. Didn't really have an impact in this game. Penalties. He didn't have a penalty really, but otherwise didn't do anything. Ruffin, Floyd, penalty, bad penalties, bad PIs, even on non-catchable balls. You got a PI because you're tackling the receiver. And yes, they got picked apart. Maybe not in the first half, but certainly in the second half. It looked like every pass was going to be completed. It really looked like every return was going to be run back, even though only one was. That's a special teams conversation. But the secondary was not good. They got tested for really the first time all year. You could argue TCU as well, but more in this game. And maybe Phil Jerkovich, who's already lost his job and threw 3 picks for Pitt, and Texas Tech, who lost to Wyoming earlier in the year and isn't really good either. Maybe they were helping the secondary be better or look better than they really are. But the WVU secondary, even though they're banged up and they were without Aubrey Burks, was tested for the first time this season in true earnest test. And they didn't look good. They didn't succeed. They got a D, they got an F. It was not an A. Okay, they didn't do well. And the Houston receivers that I also put in the preview, going to Sam Brown and company, burners. Tons of speed there. Okay. That speed was a problem for the West Virginia secondary, which is why I thought this would be a bad matchup. The secondary, especially a banged up secondary, could not handle speedy receivers, especially if they're going to lose one-on-one matchups. They lost one-on-ones. The Houston receiver speed was way too much to handle. Too many big plays against them, certainly in the second half, and then bad penalties. Yeah, the secondary was not good. But with all of that said, Jalen Anderson catches that pass, and it's a touchdown instead of an interception that ended up being 7 points the other way. There's not a kickoff return, and then if they don't catch the Hail Mary at the end, it still goes to a West Virginia victory. They probably are going to end up with a better season in terms of overall record this year. They're on path to do that. But you lose. You lose on the road. Bad matchup or not, Dana or not, Houston having it all on the line or not, backs against the wall or not. West Virginia had to win. They didn't win. Could have been a big moment. Could have been a big win. Could have been en route to a special season at 5-1 and 3-0 in conference play. Nonetheless, 4-2 and 2-1 in conference play. Still a way better projection than anybody would have thought entering the season. But conversations about being ranked, over. I'm done with them. I mean, I was saying it before. I thought, based on the landscape, it was true. I wouldn't say it if I didn't believe it, but over. And now you're looking at making sure you get a bowl game out of this. Because you start 4-1 and you don't even get a bowl, then yeah, Brown's definitely gone. Definitely gone. But you only need 2 more wins to get there. So we'll see. And again, the Oklahoma State game at home must win. An absolute must win, especially being at home. And they are beatable. Okay. They look better now than they were earlier in the year. And they have a Hall of Fame coach in Mike Gundy. So I'm not in any way saying that he cannot get a team up to play a game on the road. They could win. It wouldn't shock me, wouldn't surprise me, wouldn't be the end of the world. In terms of my projection, it would be for West Virginia. But for this season, they need that to be a win. Got to have that be a win. So thanks to everybody who chatted along here in this post-game show / vent session. Obviously no guest here, so it was just me. So I apologize for the ranting that you basically had to endure. But I appreciate those who did chat along, Derek especially. Yeah, Derek, 10 wins is still within reach, even if you lose to Oklahoma. And Oklahoma I always thought would be a loss, obviously. Beat them last year, but they're way better. They're way more talented. They're going to be hungry as hell. I can't imagine beating, and I mean the Sooners. But even at 4-1, even if this was 5-1, 10 wins always seem like really hard to imagine. I still don't even think 9 is happening. I think the ceiling for this team is still 8 wins. That would obviously mean 4 more. They got enough of these things at home. The harder games are at home. The schedule's not that brutal the rest of the way. They could really actually win all these games, or they could lose them all. And either way would not surprise me. They might be favored in some of these games too. Granted, Vegas has been wrong a lot this year. But I mean, again, an 8-4, Brown's not getting fired. 8-4, despite this being a bad loss. After 5-7, they're gonna move on, meaning with this group and continue on to next year. But yeah, Oklahoma's gonna be a win for the Sooners. But so you figure you lose another game, but they lose more than that. But if I had a bet right now, I think I say 7-5. I mean, 3 more wins get you to 7. It wouldn't feel good because you're then looking at a losing stretch down at the end. But I hope to have Houston as a yearly game in the Big 12 play as long as Dana is coach. Exciting game. Let's get to sleep. I think you said it better than anyone else could have said it. Hopefully Dana is still the Houston coach, though, because this isn't enough to fully keep him. I mean, he's going to have to keep on winning and crawl them into a bowl game. Would have lost this, probably wouldn't actually. You want a blessing in disguise and be like a glass half full take here. If Dana would have lost this and got fired, you wouldn't get him coming back to West Virginia because he would be fired. So winning this game may save his job, and then he gets to come back to West Virginia next year and gets to drive past the Orange Bowl imagery on the stadium. You get to have that moment that if he was fired, you wouldn't get to have. So maybe that's something. But yeah, this was a major big win for Dana in the Houston program. A really, really bad loss for West Virginia. Certainly the fan base losing to Dana. The players just felt a bad loss, and it'll be a rough trip back. Oklahoma State is now a must-win game at home. They still certainly can have a special year in terms of a good season off of how bad it was. Brown can still save his job. They can still be a top 4 team in conference play or something like that. They certainly are not going to be last and be 14th, and they certainly should still be a bowl team. I mean, 4 wins, 4-2. They should get 2 more. I say they finish 7-5 at this point from what I'm seeing. That wouldn't be a great end of the season by any means, but it would still be an overall solid year. 8-4 would still be really, really good, and it would still be like an average end of the season. 9-10, just I can't see it. But appreciate everyone to joining me. Certainly a big shout out again there to Derek, who actually I know. So I'm glad you joined me here in the chat. And feel free to jump on these whenever I do. I'm not going to obviously do a post-game show next week because I'll be at the stadium. So maybe I'll do a Mountaineer live chat or something throughout the week or at some point. But head over to WV Sports now for the rest of our coverage of this game. We'll get those videos up from the post-game pressers. When we get them, we'll get conversation and analysis and the rest when I do them and when all that happens. But WV Sports now is the coverage, and the Houston Cougars snatch a victory away from the West Virginia Mountaineers. Dana Holgorsen snatches a victory away from the West Virginia Mountaineers. Houston gets their first Big 12 win. Dana does it against his old team, and West Virginia now falls to 4-2 and 2-1 in conference play.